Here's what's coming up on The World Today. 21-year-old Russian soldier on trial for murder pleads for forgiveness as war crimes trial resumes in Kyiv. US President Joe Biden meets Finland's president and Swedish Prime Minister after both nations submitted applications to join NATO. Plus, a group of 7 financial leaders are in Germany to discuss helping Ukraine pay its bills in coming months, among several other issues. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. More soldiers stranded in the Azovstal steelworks appear to be surrendering to Russia after being holed up in the besieged Mariupol city. According to the Russian Defense Ministry, nearly 800 fighters have surrendered over the last day. The evacuation marks the likely end of the battle for the southern Ukrainian port city, which lies in ruins after weeks of relentless Russian bombardment. Or elsewhere in Ukraine, the first trial in Kyiv of a Russian soldier accused of war crimes has resumed, as the 21-year-old is asking for forgiveness from the widow of the man he killed. His trial heard that he was ordered to kill the civilian. Also, elsewhere, a Ukrainian official says 4 people have been killed by Russian shelling in Severodonetsk, and a civilian has been killed in the shelling of a village in Russia near the border with Ukraine.
Russia's defense ministry says that 771 Ukrainian fighters had surrendered from the Azovstal steelworks in the devastated Ukrainian city of Mariupol in the last 24 hours. Some of the men purported to be surrendered Ukrainian fighters from the Azov regiment could be seen with crutches and eye patches in the footage released by the ministry. Russia's defense ministry released new footage on Thursday of what it claims are Ukrainian soldiers from a besieged steel plant. In the video, some of the men that appear to be in a room with bunk beds are speaking on camera about the conditions of their detention. They say they have been given food and housing and are being treated well. It's not possible to establish if the men were speaking freely.
Help has been given to my fellow officers. I was assured that everything was good. The seriously wounded were taken out, at least at the first stage where I was. I asked. They assured me that everything was fine, that they did the bandages for them. So I hope that some kind of treatment will continue.
Mariupol is the biggest city Russia has captured so far and allows Russian President Vladimir Putin to claim a rare victory in the war. In the meantime, a Russian soldier accused of war crime on Thursday apologized in court to the widow of a man he's accused of killing in cold blood. In a trial that has huge symbolic importance for Kyiv, the 21-year-old Russian tank commander is charged with murdering the unarmed 62-year-old civilian in the northeastern Ukrainian village of Chupakivka on February 28. On Wednesday, he pleaded guilty and, if convicted, could be sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, more sanctions continue to hit Russia, the latest coming from the UK against the Russian airline sector. Britain said it was introducing new sanctions against state-owned Aeroflot, Ural Airlines and Rossiya Airlines to prevent them from selling their unused landing slots at British airports. The British government says it estimated the landing slots were worth £50 million. On a lighter note, President Vladimir Zelensky addressed Ukrainians in a video message on Thursday to wish them health on Vyshyvanka Day, the day of the traditional embroidered shirt. Still photographs taken in Lviv on Thursday showed women dancing and people wearing the Vyshyvanka, which is an integral part of the national Ukrainian costume. Babies also joined the Embroidery Day celebrations. Newborns in the Odessa Regional Maternity Hospital received their first presents. Girls were given shirts with red ornaments, boys with blue.
The VOA's Anna Chernikova is in Kyiv for us now. She joins us to discuss more about today's war crimes trial and many other issues. Hello, Anna. Thank you for speaking to us.
Hello. So today was another day of the trial, of the first trial of the Russian soldier. What we know so far that he really asked for apologize. He basically said that he pleaded guilty, and he said that he was ordered to kill the civilian. What he said exactly to the video of the victim, I would quote, he said, "I admit that you will not be able to forgive me, but I apologize," end of quote. So the court haven't say anything final today as of now, but what we know is that the prosecutor is asking for a lifelong detention for the soldier. The video is also asking for a lifelong term, but again, she highlighted that she doesn't mind if Mr. Shishimarin would be exchanged for the Mariupol defenders. So we will see how all this will go. What we found out today after the testimony of the video and of Vadim Shishmarin, the 21-year-old Russian soldier. So Mr. Shishmarin said that he and another 4 soldiers were going through one of the villages in Suma region. They were going with a stolen car that they stolen previously from another Ukrainian civilian who managed to escape the Russian soldiers. When they saw the victim, they saw him talking on the phone, and they decided that this is kind of a danger to them, and basically they shoot him because they were afraid that he might be talking to Ukrainian soldiers. This is again what he said to the court. The video from her own position also testified because she saw how all this happened. She saw it from the garden of the building. So she told that when her husband was out, she heard that the shot, and he got to the garden, and he saw the car with Mr. Shishmarin shooting. Then she hid it, and when the car left, she looked again at the street, and she saw her husband lying dead at the street. This is what we know for now, and we will see how the procedure will continue.
So do we know how long, this might take? And are there any other war crimes soldiers that are, awaiting trial?
What we know for now that there are definitely another soldiers waiting trial, and there are plans for this trial. Again, we don't know the details yet because, of course, it's under the brief of secret. But I think that we should expect more. In terms of this particular trial, also there were no official information on when it should end, but it's definitely coming to an end because, most of the details are now revealed.
All right, let's talk about the Azov soldiers that, been stranded in in Mariupol. Russia says many more of those soldiers have surrendered, nearly 800, and they released the footage showing those men in bunk beds. What does Ukraine make of this?
The Russian side is claiming that they have surrendered. However, Ukrainian side is highlighting that this is evacuation operation because this operation was organized together with the Red Cross and together with the UN. So this is basically was a compromise because situation at Azovstal was very critical for the past couple of months already. Officially, Ukrainian officials do not comment. Do not comment much on this. What we know and what they're saying that evacuation procedure is ongoing. So this it hasn't ended yet, and more soldiers should be evacuated. Some soldiers still Ukrainian soldiers remain at the plant. We don't know exactly the amount, but they are there. What we know confirmed from the Ukrainian officials that 53 seriously injured soldiers have been evacuated to Novoazovsk, which is occupied territory by Russia at in the Donetsk region, and another 211 have been evacuated to Olenivka. It's another also occupied town in Donetsk region. Also, we know for sure that yesterday another 7 buses were evacuated with soldiers inside, and we don't know the exact number. However, today we got certain updates from the Red Cross International, from the International Committee of the Red Cross. So they said that they have already recorded and they have already registered. Registered would be the correct word. Hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers who have been evacuated from the Azovstal plant. They also said that they maintain very deep and confidential negotiation with both sides. And also they confirmed that they have visited the soldiers today. They went to check those soldiers who are now located at Olenivka. It's what I said before. More of the soldiers are there, and they checked their conditions there. And again, not particular details have been revealed because this is a secret and confidential information.
All right then, Anna. I see you have an embroidered shirt on. It's embroidered shirt day today. Happy embroidered shirt day today.
Yes, this is a very special holiday here in Ukraine, and this year it's very special indeed. Thank you.
All right then, Anna Chernikova, VOA's correspondent there in Kyiv, Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden has welcomed Finnish President Sauli Niinistö and Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson to the White House. This after the leaders of both Nordic nations submitted NATO applications. Sweden and Finland's bids to join NATO come in response to Russia's war on Ukraine, which sparked security concerns across the region. While their moves to join the alliance mark a dramatic evolution in European security and geopolitics. The leaders are scheduled to hold a meeting in the cabinet room of the White House and will also deliver remarks from the Rose Garden. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan had earlier told reporters that the meeting with the leaders in Washington will allow the three nations to coordinate on the path forward and compare notes on the move. The U.S. Embassy in Kyiv has reopened after a 3-month closure due to Russia's February 24 invasion of Ukraine. Embassy spokesperson Daniel Langenkamp said operations are resuming, and this was shortly before the U.S. flag was raised above the embassy. A small number of diplomats are expected to return initially to staff the mission. Consular operations will not resume immediately, and no travel advisory from the State Department remains in place across Ukraine. The U.S. Embassy closed on February 14, 10 days before Russia launched a full-scale invasion. Embassy staff were said to have spent the first 2 months of the war in Poland. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says he is in intense contact with Russia, Ukraine, Turkey, and the United States and EU in an effort to restore Ukrainian grain export as a global food crisis worsens. Addressing a food security meeting at the United Nations hosted by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Mr. Guterres appealed to Russia to allow the safe and secure export of grain stored in Ukrainian ports, and for Russian food and fertilizers to have full and unrestricted access to world markets.
The Russian invasion in Ukraine is amplifying and accelerating all these factors: climate change, COVID-19, and inequality. It threatens to tip tens of millions of people over the edge into food insecurity, followed by malnutrition, mass hunger and famine in a crisis that could last for years.
Governments and international organizations can also come together to compel the Russian Federation to create corridors so that food and other vital supplies can safely leave Ukraine by land or by sea. There are an estimated 22 million tons of grain sitting in silos in Ukraine right now, food that could immediately go toward helping those in need if it can simply get out of the country. Some have tried to blame the sanctions imposed on the Russian Federation by the United States and many other countries for worsening this crisis. This is false. When we impose sanctions on Russia in order to end the war as quickly as possible, we deliberately and carefully created exceptions for agricultural goods and fertilizer. We're working every day to get countries any information or assistance they need to ensure that sanctions are not preventing food or fertilizer from leaving Russia or anywhere else.
The latest United Nations forecast says the war in Ukraine has upended the fragile economic recovery from the pandemic, triggering a devastating humanitarian crisis in Europe, increasing food and commodity prices, and globally exacerbating inflationary pressures. We're speaking to journalists in New York. Director of Economic Analysis and Policy Division at the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs informed that global economic growth prospects have changed dramatically since the last forecast in January, when a 4% growth was expected. That forecast has now been adjusted to just 3.1%.
So the war in Ukraine has upended a fragile economic recovery from the pandemic. Global economic growth prospects have changed dramatically since our last forecast in January, when we were expecting 4% growth in 2022. We are now revising this global growth forecast to just 3.1%. This deterioration in growth prospects is broad-based, including for the world's largest economies, the United States, the European Union, China, and many developing countries. There are uncertainties in this forecast, including significant downside risks, such as those due to the length of the war, the continuance of the pandemic, or adverse shocks from climate change. But for now, we already see economic repercussions playing out globally through multiple channels. One of these is the surging prices in food, energy, and other commodities that are driving inflation. Global inflation, we are projecting, will increase to 6.7% in 2022, which is twice the average of 2.9% during the past decade. Inflation is rising in many countries, an additional challenge to an inclusive recovery, as it disproportionately affects low-income households. Food inflation is worsening food insecurity, pushing many below the poverty line, and policy responses to rising inflation can have additional knock-on effects in developing countries, as the report discusses.
This is an opportunity for ramp up or global climate action, basically to make sure that we don't restart drilling and the world economy actually takes this as an opportunity to invest in renewables and to make sure that we don't deviate from the path of that we had before the crisis, before the pandemic, and then the Ukraine crisis. And that commitment needs to be there and strengthened this time of the global crisis.
Still to come on The World Today. UK public health experts say global spread of monkeypox is a cause for alarm but not panic. The suspected cases are reported in Britain, Portugal, Spain and the United States. And also we have more on Africa's COVID vaccination drive. Welcome back to the program. The group of 7 financial leaders are in Germany for a summit and are likely to agree on Thursday and Friday how to help Ukraine pay its bills in coming months. But surging inflation, climate change, supply chains, and the impending food crisis globally are also on their agenda. Finance ministers and central bank governors of the United States, Japan, Canada, Britain, Germany, France, and Italy are holding talks as Ukraine is struggling to fend off the Russian attack and is also running out of cash. Analysts say the Ukraine war is a game changer for Western powers, forcing them to rethink decades-old relations with Russia, not only in terms of security, but also in energy, food, and global supply alliances, from microchips to rare earths. Sri Lanka has defaulted on its debt for the first time in its history as the country struggles with its worst financial crisis in more than 70 years. This comes after a 30-day grace period to repay $78 million of unpaid debt interest payments expired on Wednesday. The governor of Sri Lanka's central bank said the country was now in a preemptive default. Defaults happen when governments are unable to meet some or all of their debt payments to creditors. In the meantime, as you see on your screen, police fired tear gas and water cannons to push back student protesters who marched through the streets of Colombo, demanding the arrest and removal of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Hundreds of students carrying black flags marched on Colombo's central fort area, chanting slogans against the government. Police fired repeated rounds of tear gas and water cannons to push them back. U.S. intelligence shows there could be a North Korean nuclear test or missile test or both before, during, or after President Joe Biden's trip to South Korea and Japan starting this week. That's according to the U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, who says the U.S. is preparing for all contingencies, including the possibility that such a provocation would occur while in Korea or in Japan. Sullivan says the United States is coordinating closely with South Korea and Japan on the issue and had also discussed North Korea with his Chinese counterpart Yang Jiechi about North Korea in a phone call on Wednesday.
With respect to the issue of North Korea, we've said from this podium, we've said at the State Department, and we've indicated in quite clear terms that our intelligence does reflect the genuine possibility that there will be either a further missile test, including long-range missile test, or a nuclear test, or frankly both, in the days leading into, on, or after the president's trip to the region. We are preparing for all contingencies, including the possibility that such a provocation would occur while we are in Korea or in Japan. We are coordinating closely with our allies in both Korea and Japan on this. We have spoken with counterparts in China. I spoke with my Chinese counterpart this morning and covered this issue of the DPRK. And we are prepared, obviously, to make both short and longer term adjustments to our military posture as necessary to ensure that we are providing both defense and deterrence to our allies in the region and that we're responding to any North Korean provocation.
U.S. health authorities are investigating cases of suspected and confirmed monkeypox in the U.S., Canada, Spain, Portugal, and the U.K. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health said it had confirmed a single case of monkeypox virus infection in a man who had recently traveled to Canada. The state agency says it is working with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and relevant local boards of health to carry out contact tracing. In the meantime, UK public health experts say the global spread of monkeypox is causing alarm among public health officials, but it's unlikely to spread like the coronavirus epidemic. Jimmy Whitworth, a professor of international public health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, says this has never been seen before, and so it's quite alarming from a public health point of view.
There's a patient in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts who has been confirmed to have infection with monkeypox. That patient is currently hospitalized at Massachusetts General Hospital and is admitted to our special pathogens program. He is in stable condition and the patient is doing well, safely in isolation in our unit.
So I'll just give a broad overview of the patient's admission so far. So the patient was admitted on the 12th. They were being evaluated for various symptoms. During the course of their admission, they were identified as a possible monkeypox suspect. And this was really unusual because the patient had no travel history, no exposure to animals that would be known to be reservoirs. The risk factor here has been men having sex with men, and so that sort of close contact. And that makes sense because the way this is spread is through both respiratory droplets with very close proximity, face-to-face respiratory droplets, but also direct contact with the lesions that have virus in them.
In the United States, morgue officials have begun investigation into identifying bodies of several migrants that are stored in a southern Arizona morgue. Now, these are migrants who died crossing the Mexico-US border. The Pima County morgue has been recovering the bodies and remains of unidentified border crossers since the year 2000. Over the course of 20 years, about 1,000 to 1,200 suspected migrants have been processed.
Inside a cooler in Tucson, Arizona, where the temperature is set at 43 degrees Fahrenheit, lie the bodies of men and women who lost their lives while trying to find greener pastures in the United States. Their names are unknown, and while an investigation takes place, their body bags are labeled as unidentified.
In our facility right now, we probably have about 100 people that are unidentified that we suspect to fall into this group, undocumented border crossers. If we're looking at it since we've been keeping track, which is the year 2000, we've had almost 3,500 remains come in that we've investigated, and about 1,000 to 1,200 of those are unidentified.
The Title 42 Face-in Repeal, the question that remains unanswered is whether more people will attempt to cross the border and if that will result in more registered deaths.
I know a lot of people are kind of sitting around thinking about what's going to happen with the expiration of Title 42. Is that going to result in a lot more people crossing, which could potentially lead to some deaths? I don't know.
Title 42, which was invoked at the start of the COVID pandemic in 2020, is a World War II-era public health order that prohibits entry into the United States if the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention believes it could introduce communicable diseases into the country. As of May the 10th, the Pima County morgue had 100 bodies of unidentified border crossers being processed under an active investigation. Other remains are also stored inside the morgue, either cremants or skeletal remains, also kept inside the facility are the belongings that are found on them.
Here, for example, is just this pocket knife, and that's all we have on this particular individual. Let's see what else we can find. This has quite a bit more. So here's some documentation from, let's say, Mexico. Here's an actual, like a marriage certificate or something. And this is all the same, 2 different cell phones. This little kind of soiled card with writing on it. Here's a belt buckle. Here's some kind of wristband. So all this might all be helpful.
There is not a standard process for receiving and removing the bodies from the morgue. Each case is handled differently depending on the information that has been obtained and whether or not contact has been made with a family member. But the Pima County runs the Indigent Interment Program, which provides services for circumstances in which a dissident is unclaimed or abandoned. These remains are stored inside columbariums of the Pima County Cemetery. Last year, Pima County received a federal grant to exhume several bodies from the cemetery in order to take suitable DNA samples for further investigation.
Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird joins us now for more discussions. Hello, Maria. Let's begin with the public health situation in Massachusetts, a case of monkeypox.
That's correct. There is one case. And so, as you stated earlier in the show, is that is a very rare disease. And obviously here in the U.S., we don't really see a lot of monkeypox, especially it's assumed that this is a West African strain of monkeypox. And so they're not quite sure how it was transmitted to the individual. As you stated as well, is that he was in Canada. And so they're really trying to see how did it make it here to the U.S. and what is the likelihood that anyone else could have contracted the monkeypox while this individual was here, and if there's anything that they need to be looking into further outside of just Massachusetts. And so I think that's where we are. I don't think there's major concern as far as Americans being concerned about it. As it was stated too, it's a little different than COVID-19. It's not as easily spread and transmissible just through being in a close environment with someone. It actually has to be that saliva, the respiratory lesions, things like that. And so I think due to the lower rates of transmission, I think that has allowed Americans to be a bit calm about it. And again, it is just in the state of Massachusetts where it's been found.
Also, we know UK health experts earlier said, it's not a cause for panic, but it's a cause for, it's an alarming cause. How are people reacted to it?
Most people are obviously, a bit concerned about how it did make it here. And I think the real concern is just around whether or not there's anyone else that could have contracted or received the monkeypox virus. And so that, I think, is what's the concern. I think once you're able to fully identify how the man was contracted the virus, and then also, too, once they're able to truly confirm what his outcomes will be, I think, and if Harvard is able to actually treat him appropriately, I think that will also bring some comfort to Americans knowing that he was able to successfully complete treatment and obviously go back to normal life.
All right, Maria, let's switch gears now to the U.S. immigration crisis. We understand an action called the Title 42 is closer to being repealed. Tell us more about that, and that this is even expected to open doors to immigrants, especially from the U.S.-Mexico border.
You're correct. Title 42 was put in place as a result of COVID-19, and it basically just focused on if someone looked like they could be transmitting the COVID-19 virus, and if someone looked like they were ill, it gave the Border Patrol the rights to be able to send them back. And so it was kind of like a very easy way to get those who are trying to cross into the U.S. Headed back without much cause there. We know that just recently about 96,000 individuals have been exported as a result of the Title 42. And so if we see that on May 23rd, if it is rescinded, which President Biden is expected to rescind that on May the 23rd, and we do know that 21 states are putting a lawsuit together to try to appeal that rescission. If it is not repealed and if it goes forward, we could definitely see an increase in the number of those who are migrating into the U.S., both legally and illegally. And this also would allow those individuals who are here, the border patrols and those that are part of the immigration policies and those officers that are with immigration will not be able to just send someone home as a result of Title 42. So that could create a major increase in immigration. We already know that the borders are very full. We know that we have seen a rise in individuals at the border to try to cross into the U.S. And so that's what many Republicans obviously are concerned is this is a Trump administration policy that was put into place. But again, the Biden administration sees this as a way of unfair treatment as it looks at immigration in the U.S. and they're saying that it's no longer needed and that COVID actually is more under control and there are treatment options to address the virus.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Maria Bird. In Mexico, protesters have turned out in Mexico City to demand justice for victims of violence and femicide. Relatives of femicide victims, gender violence survivors held up crucifixes and banners showing photographs of disappeared or killed women just outside the National Palace of the historic city center. According to the protesters, the violence against women, teenagers and girls in the streets, schools and at home had prompted this action. According to federal crime statistics, Mexico has reported 155 femicides in the first 2 months of this year, and nearly 25,000 more women are missing nationally. According to official data, around 10 women are killed each day in Mexico, where gender violence regularly sparks protests. Back here in Africa, the United Nations says the Afar region in Ethiopia is facing multiple humanitarian emergencies and mass displacement due to drought and conflict has resulted in devastating food insecurity, pushing children and their families to the brink. Overall, according to local authorities, an estimated 1.7 million people in 23 areas are affected by drought and conflict. Latest local government figures estimate that over 330,000 people have been newly displaced since January 2022.
We are tackling, of course, addressing the water and sanitation needs. We are building latrines in camps. We're bringing water either by water trucking or drilling new boreholes or rehabilitating boreholes that have been destroyed. We are trying to bring also education and protection through an integrated program called BETE. So we try to hire teachers and social workers for them, for children to have access to psychosocial support, but also, basic education, because for months and months they missed out on education. Another key part of our response is also cash in emergencies. We would like to expand that part because it's key, that makes people dignified. It empowers people to use the cash for their priority needs. And of course, nutrition. Nutrition is on top of our agenda. In Afar, the malnutrition rates were very high before of this crisis, and now they're very, very high. So we are responding with nutrition supplies and also nutrition services.
As COVID-19 vaccine doses finally rush into Africa, it appears the demand is dropping, worrying health experts who say unvaccinated populations increase the risk of new variants. Or to boost uptake, countries are focusing on mobile vaccination campaigns in which teams are visiting communities to educate them about vaccines and offer doses on site.
The Gambia, in the middle of a week-long nationwide campaign to get its citizens vaccinated against COVID-19. The team manages to convince truck driver Adama Sese.
I wanted to do it. I had even heard that they were at the police office, but as I am a driver until now, I did not have the opportunity to go and get vaccinated against COVID-19. I do it to protect myself, but also to go to other countries like Senegal.
Unfortunately, Sese is the only one of 10 people the team, led by Joseph Mendy, manages to get vaccinated that day.
It's still complicated though, because you have to sensitize people, you talk to them before you start the actual process. You have to convince them that the vaccine is safe, it's good, it's beneficial before they take it. And where we are going actually is a university. So most of them are already getting the information.
Once set up at the university campus, Mendy only encounters refusal after refusal. Students either ignore him or say they are too afraid of needles.
Still to come on the program. It's a happy reunion for two Holocaust survivors. After nearly 80 years, the two men reunite in Los Angeles. Stay with us for more. Welcome back to the program. We continue in Peru, where police authorities have arrested a pigeon smuggling cannabis into a Peruvian prison. The winged narco pigeon was intercepted as it landed on the grounds of the Huancayo prison to drink water from a puddle formed on the premises after the rains. When approaching the animal, the officers noticed it had a small package tied to its neck, and after capturing it, they observed it was a small bag made from light blue cloth wrapped with masking tape. According to the police, the bird was carrying at least 30 grams of marijuana. The prison staff notified the public ministry to carry out investigations into the origin of the drug and the homing bird. Brazil is facing unusual weather as the storm Yakikan, a storm with winds of 110 kilometers per hour, has prompted a snowfall for the second day in southern region. Several cities in the Rio Grande do Sul and Santa Catarina, among other states, registered the phenomenon. Brazilians and tourists were excited by the views and couldn't resist the idea of gathering in the streets to enjoy the natural event. With the arrival of the subtropical storm, Rio Grande do Sul also confirmed the first death due to the weather. Snowfalls and freezing temperatures are expected to keep dropping, with possible snowfalls in northern cities and Santa Catarina state. It's a few days before Australia decides on a new government, and its citizens remain split on their election choice, with voters highlighting the rising cost of living, climate change and the unpopularity of Prime Minister Scott Morrison as key electoral issues. Polls released on Wednesday showed Morrison's Liberal National Coalition losing narrowly to centre-left Labour led by Anthony Albanese, ending 9 years of Conservative government. Rising living costs have dominated the final stretches of the campaign, with voters rating it as the most critical issue in some polls. Among criticisms of Morrison in his time in office since August 2018 have been his handling of the bushfires that killed 24 people and left thousands homeless. During that time, he took a family holiday to Hawaii in December 2019 during the crisis, for which he apologized. Well, other issues raised by voters include better health care and education funding.
I definitely want someone that is going to take the climate crisis seriously, because at the moment I feel like Australia is really lagging. And for me, I think the ICAC is really, really important, because right now I feel like politics in Australia is being really influenced by the big donators, and that for me is a massive.
The main issue at the moment everyone's facing is the cost of living, to be honest. As a middle income earner, I would say that, bringing up your children, sending them to the school, and the expenses that you are facing at the moment, and the cost of living that's going up, especially the inflation rate.
The support that I got with the last 2 years, especially during COVID, I was out of a job. My mum was also out of a job, but we gained the support that we needed. Otherwise, everything would have gone downhill, but because of the support that we got during the last 2 years, we were okay and we got to move on with life, and I think that's what influenced my vote for today.
Britain's Prince Charles has met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss, among different topics, the challenges posed by climate change. Mr. Trudeau welcomed Prince Charles at Rideau Hall during his and Camilla's Duchess of Cornwall visit 3-day Canada tour. Well, Prince Charles also had a meeting with the Governor General of Canada, Mary Simon. The royal couple's tour will include the Northwest Territories and Canada's Capital Region and is focused on the issues of climate change and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
I'd just like to urge if it's possible here today to make best use of Canada's leadership in the world, particularly with the G7 and the Commonwealth of Government meeting next month, by shining a light on your examples and your solutions. And critically, as we start this discussion today, I would ask us all to recognise that tweaking existing mechanisms may not be enough.
One of Britain's most loved royals, Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, are celebrating their third wedding anniversary. Meghan, a former US actress, and Harry, Queen Elizabeth's grandson and sixth in line to the British throne, became one of the world's biggest celebrity couples since their glittering marriage at Windsor Castle. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex welcomed their first child, Archie, the following May, but have since shared a fraught relationship with the UK media. In January 2020, the couple announced they would step away from their position as senior royals, citing false and invasive coverage as a major factor in their decision. Well, the announcement sent shockwaves throughout the royal family as they tried to reposition the couple's position in public life. The couple subsequently relocated to the United States, where they launched a new charitable foundation, Archwell, after stepping away from their royal roles. Well, in June of last year, they welcomed their second child, Lady Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. How would you feel if you were to win £184 million? Well, this story will interest you. A little over a week ago, Joe and Jess Strait were facing months, maybe years of renovating what they thought was their dream home, a house in the Gloucestershire countryside. Well, the couple won over £180 million playing the Euro Millions lottery on a lucky dip ticket. And they speak about the moment they learned they had won the British record-breaking amount. Joe described it as surreal and ridiculous, but he says he first thought they had won £184,000 rather than 184 million. And then he looked at his emails in bed in the morning and saw it was millions. Well, he decided to let his wife Jess sleep on it until her alarm went off 20 minutes later before breaking the news. He said he spent the 20 minutes scrolling through properties at an online estate agent's website with no upper price limit. Well, the couple from Cheltenham in southwest England won exactly £184,262,899 with a ticket on the draw on Tuesday, May 10th. Now that is a British record. We just keep on smiling.
You guys happy?
So I checked my emails and I had an email saying that I'd won a prize. And I took it as the usual lucky dip type thing, and I opened up the app, logged in, and then I looked at the amount and I put the phone down. And I picked the phone up again and I looked at the amount again. And I thought, I first thought it was in thousands. And I thought...
Were you excited that it was thousands?
Yeah, I was over the moon. I thought,
So you thought you won 148,000?
Yeah, and I just thought life-changing, we can, with the mortgage and everything else, that, it was going to change our lives. And I actually started counting the digits, and at that point, I thought, it was, amazing, but also surreal. It didn't feel real. So I put the phone down, and Jess hadn't had a great night's sleep, so I thought, do I wake her up? Don't I wake her up? What do I do? So I just sat there for a minute, trying to take it all in, and I thought, well, I'll give her, because it's only 20 minutes, I'll give her the extra 20 minutes till her alarm goes off. And I started, because normally in life, we've been trying to move house for quite a while, and other bits and pieces. We've not been a huge amount of time in the house we're in now. So you go on Rightmove, and you set your limits on what you can afford. And in the past, everything we've kind of wanted is far beyond what we could afford. So I thought, I don't need to filter. I can actually just look at anything. So I sat there giggling away to myself, thinking, oh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I still didn't really believe it, but it was fun, you know. It was like, yeah. So,
It was make-believe at that point,
yeah, it
wasn't
was, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Surreal indeed. Well, we end the program with the reunion of two Holocaust survivors. For all they know, George Bercy and Frank Schatz crossed paths in the anti-Nazi Hungarian underground nearly 80 years ago. Regardless, they met for the first time, at least since then, in a Los Angeles reunion sponsored by the American Jewish Congress. Bercy, who's aged 101, is a pioneering Los Angeles surgeon who still reports to work in a white coat at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. 96-year-old Schatz is an author who still writes a weekly column for the Virginia Gazette. Both native Hungarians, they each escaped a Nazi labor camp and later achieved prominence in their respective fields in the United States. They share wide smiles as they met at Bercy's Los Angeles nursing home. As Bercy waited, Schatz strode toward him, walking briskly with a cane. They hugged as Schatz presented him with one of his books, personally inscribed.
It's such a pleasure for me.
Well, that is just wonderful to watch. And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Layo Olarinde. Bye for now.